The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport vehicle. A suspected arms trafficking operation was being run from within this very base, and traditional investigations had hit dead ends. Sarah's job was to infiltrate as a recruit and gather evidence. The other recruits around her were a mix of backgrounds and motivations. Some were here to serve their country, others to escape difficult circumstances back home. None of them suspected that the quiet woman standing next to them had already completed missions in 3 different countries and could kill a person with her bare hands in 7 different ways. As the group was marched to the barracks, Sarah noticed the suspicious glances from some of the male recruits. She had expected this. It was part of the cover. In their eyes, she was an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Little did they know that their skepticism would actually help her mission by keeping attention away from her true capabilities. The first few days passed in a blur of basic training activities. Sarah deliberately performed at an average level, careful not to stand out either positively or negatively. She stumbled during some physical exercises, appeared confused during weapons training, and asked the same basic questions any genuine recruit might ask, all while secretly observing the base's operations and identifying potential targets for her investigation. It was during the 3rd night that the first incident occurred. Sarah was alone in the shower facilities when she heard footsteps approaching. 3 male recruits entered, their intentions clear from their leering expressions and crude comments. They had been watching her, waiting for an opportunity to assert their dominance and make her feel unwelcome. "Lost sweetheart," one of them sneered, blocking the exit. "Maybe you should have stayed home where you belong." Sarah's training kicked in immediately, but she forced herself to play the role. She wrapped a towel around herself and tried to appear frightened, backing against the wall. "Please, I just want to be left alone," she said, making her voice shake convincingly. The 3 men moved closer, emboldened by what they perceived as weakness. They had no idea they were cornering one of the most dangerous operatives in the intelligence community. Sarah's mind quickly calculated distances, identified potential weapons, and planned multiple escape routes. Some recruits expressed sympathy for Sarah, while others seemed to view it as proof that women didn't belong in military training. The 3 men involved claimed they were just trying to talk to her and that her reaction was an overreaction to an innocent encounter. Sarah reported the incident to her superior officers, maintaining her cover as a frightened recruit seeking protection. The investigation was perfunctory at best. A few questions, some warnings about inappropriate behavior, and then back to training as usual. It was exactly the kind of institutional dismissiveness that Sarah had expected, and that would actually work in her favor. The incident had an unexpected benefit for her mission. Several female recruits approached her afterward, offering support and sharing their own experiences with harassment and discrimination. These conversations gave Sarah valuable insights into the base's culture and helped her identify potential allies who might have access to useful information. As the days passed, Sarah began to notice patterns that weren't visible in the official reports. Certain areas of the base were off-limits to recruits without clear explanations. Some senior personnel had irregular schedules that didn't match their supposed duties. Equipment and supplies seemed to go missing from inventory without proper documentation. Most importantly, she began to identify the key players in what she suspected was the trafficking operation. There was Sergeant Morrison, who seemed to have more money than his salary would suggest. Lieutenant Collins, who received frequent calls on a personal phone during duty hours. And Captain Thompson, who made regular trips off base in unmarked vehicles. Sarah's training had taught her to be patient, to gather information slowly and carefully without raising suspicion. But as she witnessed more incidents of harassment and intimidation directed at female recruits, she found it increasingly difficult to maintain her passive cover. Every instinct told her to fight back, to show these bullies what real strength looked like. The breaking point came during her second week of training. Sarah was in the mess hall when she witnessed a group of male recruits surrounding another female recruit, making crude jokes and grabbing at her food tray. The woman was clearly distressed but trying not to show it, afraid that any reaction would only make things worse. Sarah's hand tightened on her own tray as she watched the scene unfold. She could end this situation in seconds, a few precise moves, and all 5 of those men would be on the ground, unable to harass anyone for quite some time. But doing so would raise questions about her background and training that she couldn't answer without blowing her cover. Instead, she forced herself to look away and finish her meal in silence. The mission had to come first, no matter how much it went against her personal instincts to protect others. She consoled herself with the knowledge that if her investigation was successful, she would ultimately be helping far more people than just the women being harassed on this base. That night, as she lay in her bunk listening to the quiet conversations of her fellow recruits, Sarah reflected on the complexity of her situation. She was surrounded by people who saw her as weak and vulnerable, unaware that she was actually one of the most dangerous people they would ever encounter. The irony wasn't lost on her. In order to protect her real identity, she had to allow others to believe she was exactly the kind of helpless victim she had dedicated her life to defending. 3 weeks into her undercover mission, Sarah had established herself as the weakest recruit in the program. Her carefully crafted persona of incompetence had convinced everyone around her that she barely belonged in military training. The harassment had escalated, but so had her access to information. The bullies' confidence in her helplessness made them careless around her, and she overheard conversations that revealed more about the base's hidden operations. During combat training, Instructor Davis paired recruits for hand-to-hand combat exercises. Sarah found herself matched against Jake Morrison, the nephew of Sergeant Morrison and one of the most aggressive recruits in her unit. Jake was 6 feet tall, muscular, and had been looking for an opportunity to humiliate her in front of the entire group. "This should be quick," Jake announced loudly, flexing his muscles for the watching crowd. "Try not to cry too much when you hit the ground." Sarah positioned herself in the regulation fighting stance, deliberately keeping her guard too low and her feet positioned incorrectly. She had studied Jake's fighting style during previous exercises and knew exactly how he would attack. Her plan was to let him throw her around a bit, take some minor hits, and then lose convincingly. The whistle blew, and Jake immediately charged forward with a wild haymaker. Sarah pretended to be surprised by his speed, stumbling backward and raising her arms defensively. His fist glanced off her shoulder, a hit she could have easily avoided or countered, but instead she spun dramatically and fell to the mat. The watching recruits erupted in laughter and jeers. "Get up, Martinez. Show us what you're made of," someone shouted. Sarah struggled to her feet, playing up the disorientation and fear. Jake was grinning broadly, feeding off the crowd's energy. "Come on, is that all you've got?" he taunted, moving in for another attack. This time he grabbed her by the shoulders and attempted to throw her with a basic hip toss. Sarah allowed herself to be thrown, but as she hit the ground, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Jake was wearing a watch that she recognized, a limited edition timepiece worth more than most soldiers made in a year. It was the same watch she had seen in surveillance photos of known arms dealers. Her mind raced as she processed this new information while maintaining her act of being dazed from the throw. The exercise continued for another few minutes, with Jake dominating completely while Sarah played the role of the overmatched victim. But now her performance had a different purpose. She was buying time to think about what she had discovered and how to pursue this new lead without blowing her cover. After the training session, Sarah limped to the medical bay with exaggerated injuries. The medic, a kind woman named Patricia, cleaned her scrapes and applied ice to her bruises while making sympathetic conversation. "You don't have to prove anything to those idiots," Patricia said quietly. "Half of them peaked in high school and think this is their chance to relive their glory days." Sarah nodded gratefully, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about Jake Morrison's connection to his uncle and whether the expensive watch was evidence of involvement in the trafficking operation or just a coincidence. Either way, she needed to get closer to the Morrison family to gather more intelligence. That evening, she deliberately sat near Jake's group in the mess hall, enduring their mocking comments while listening for useful information. She learned that Jake often visited his uncle's office after hours, supposedly for family conversations, but possibly for other reasons. She also discovered that several recruits had been given special privileges by Sergeant Morrison in exchange for unspecified favors. The next phase of Sarah's mission required her to take calculated risks. She began staying late in the training areas, claiming she needed extra practice to keep up with the other recruits. This gave her opportunities to observe the base's after-hours activities and map out the movement patterns of key personnel. During one of these late-night surveillance sessions, she witnessed something that confirmed her suspicions. A truck arrived at a side entrance to the base, well after normal supply delivery hours. Sergeant Morrison was there to meet it, along with two men in civilian clothes who were definitely not military personnel. They unloaded several unmarked crates and moved them into a storage building that was supposed to contain only standard equipment. Sarah carefully documented everything she saw, using a miniature camera disguised as a button on her uniform. The images would need to be transmitted to her handlers, but she had to be extremely careful about when and how she communicated with the outside world. Any unusual behavior could raise suspicions and endanger the entire operation. The harassment from Jake and his friends was becoming more sophisticated and organized. They had moved beyond simple verbal taunts to more elaborate schemes designed to embarrass her and undermine her confidence. They put shaving cream in her boots, hid her equipment during inspections, and spread rumors about her personal life. Sarah endured it all with apparent resignation, even as every fiber of her being wanted to fight back. She knew that this treatment wasn't just about her. It was a systematic pattern of behavior designed to drive women out of the military program. The fact that she could tolerate it better than most was both an advantage for her mission and a source of personal frustration. The breakthrough came during her 4th week of training. Jake Morrison approached her after a particularly difficult day of exercises, when she was sitting alone and looking dejected. To her surprise, his manner was almost friendly. "Hey, Martinez," he said, sitting down next to her on the bench. "Look, I know some of the guys have been pretty rough on you. It's nothing personal, it's just how things work around here." Sarah looked up at him with what she hoped appeared to be grateful surprise. "I just want to fit in," she said, making her voice small and vulnerable. "I know I'm not as strong as everyone else, but I'm trying to improve." Jake nodded sympathetically, and Sarah could see him making calculations behind his eyes. "You know, maybe I could help you out. My uncle has some influence around here, and he's always looking for recruits who show the right kind of dedication." This was exactly the opening Sarah had been hoping for. "What kind of dedication?" she asked, allowing a note of hope to enter her voice. "The kind that understands how things really work," Jake replied cryptically. "Not everyone is cut out for regular military service, but there are other ways to serve your country. Other opportunities for people who are willing to be flexible." Sarah's training had prepared her to recognize recruitment tactics, and this conversation had all the hallmarks of an approach for illegal activities. Jake was testing her, seeing if she might be desperate enough or morally flexible enough to become involved in whatever operation his uncle was running. "I'd be interested in hearing more about these opportunities," she said carefully. "I really need this to work out for me." Jake smiled, apparently pleased by her response. "I'll talk to my uncle about you. He likes recruits who understand their limitations and are willing to work with the system instead of against it. There might be some extra duties available that come with additional compensation." As he walked away, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and revulsion. She was finally making progress in her investigation, but it meant convincing people that she was exactly the kind of vulnerable, corruptible person that predators looked for. The irony of using her apparent weakness as a strength wasn't lost on her. That night, she managed to transmit her first intelligence report to her handlers using a secure communication device hidden in her personal belongings. The information about the late-night deliveries and Jake's recruitment attempt would be valuable pieces of evidence, but she was still far from having enough to bring down the entire operation. The next morning brought a new challenge. During the daily inspection, Sergeant Morrison himself appeared in the barracks. His eyes swept over the lined-up recruits before settling on Sarah with particular interest. "Recruit Martinez," he said, his voice carrying the authority of years in command. "I hear you've been having some difficulties with the training program." Sarah snapped to attention, her heart racing despite her outward composure. "Yes, sir. I'm working to improve, sir." Morrison walked slowly around her, examining her uniform and posture with exaggerated care. "My nephew tells me you might be interested in alternative forms of service. Is that correct?" "Sir, I want to serve my country in whatever capacity I'm best suited for, sir, Sarah replied, sticking to the script she had prepared. The sergeant nodded approvingly. Good answer. Report to my office at 1900 hours tonight. We'll discuss some special opportunities that might be available to a recruit with your particular profile. As he left the barracks, Sarah realized that she was about to cross a new threshold in her investigation. Whatever happened in Morrison's office that evening would either provide crucial evidence for her mission or potentially expose her true identity. The game was entering a more dangerous phase, and the stakes were about to get much higher. Sarah stood outside Sergeant Morrison's office at exactly 1900 hours, her palms sweaty despite her years of training. This meeting could either provide the breakthrough her mission needed or expose her as an undercover agent. She had spent the afternoon preparing for multiple scenarios, but the unpredictable nature of the situation made her more nervous than she cared to admit. She knocked on the door with the proper military courtesy, and Morrison's gruff voice called for her to enter. The office was spartanly decorated with standard military furnishings, but Sarah's trained eye immediately noticed several expensive items that seemed out of place for a sergeant's salary. A leather briefcase sat on his desk, and she glimpsed what looked like high-end electronics partially hidden in a filing cabinet. Sit down, Martinez, Morrison said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. He studied her for a long moment, and Sarah forced herself to maintain the nervous, eager expression she had perfected over the past weeks. My nephew tells me you've been having a tough time with the standard training program, he began, leaning back in his chair. Physical requirements too demanding, other recruits giving you trouble, that sort of thing. Sarah nodded, looking down at her hands. Yes, sir. I really want to succeed here, but I'm starting to think maybe I'm not cut out for regular military service. Morrison smiled, but there was something predatory about the expression. That's where you're wrong, Martinez. You might not be cut out for one kind of service, but there are other opportunities available to recruits who show the right attitude and discretion. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, flipping through several documents while he spoke. The military has various support operations that require personnel with different skill sets. Some of these positions involve working with civilian contractors, handling special logistics, that sort of thing. Sarah leaned forward slightly, trying to appear interested while actually attempting to read the documents upside down. She caught glimpses of what looked like shipping manifests and financial records, but couldn't make out the details from her position. What kind of special logistics? She asked, allowing a note of hope to enter her voice. The kind that pays significantly better than regular military service, Morrison replied. But it requires absolute discretion and loyalty. The people involved in these operations don't tolerate mistakes or loose lips. This was clearly the recruitment pitch Sarah had been expecting. Morrison was feeling her out, seeing if she might be willing to participate in illegal activities in exchange for money and special treatment. She needed to show interest without seeming too eager or knowledgeable. I could really use the extra money, she admitted. And I promise I'm good at keeping secrets. I just want to find a way to make this work. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's what I like to hear. There's a shipment coming in tomorrow night that will need some special handling. Nothing dangerous, just moving some equipment from point A to point B without unnecessary paperwork and questions. Sarah's pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of evidence she needed to build a case against the trafficking operation. But she also knew that agreeing to participate would put her in direct contact with the criminal activity, which could be extremely dangerous if her cover was blown. What would I need to do, she asked. Just be available to help with loading and unloading, and forget everything you see afterward, Morrison said. Simple as that. You'd be paid $500 for one night's work, with more opportunities available if things go well. The amount was significant enough to tempt a struggling recruit, but small enough to seem like a minor operation. Sarah suspected this was just an entry-level test, and that the real money and serious criminal activity happened at higher levels of the organization. That sounds good to me, she said, trying to project grateful enthusiasm. Thank you for giving me this chance, sir. Morrison's expression became more serious. Before we proceed, I need to make something very clear. The people involved in this operation don't have much patience for problems. If you decide you want out after learning about our activities, that's not really an option. Once you're in, you're in. Do you understand what I'm telling you? This was definitely a threat, thinly veiled as a warning. Sarah nodded solemnly, as if she was just beginning to understand the gravity of what she was agreeing to. I understand, sir. I won't cause any problems. Good. Report to Building C at 2,300 hours tomorrow night. Come alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And be prepared to work through the night if necessary. As Sarah left Morrison's office, she felt a mixture of excitement and dread. She had successfully infiltrated the criminal operation, but now she was committed to participating in illegal activities while maintaining her cover. The slightest mistake could result in her being discovered, captured, or worse. The next day passed slowly as Sarah went through the motions of regular training while mentally preparing for the evening's mission. She managed to transmit a brief update to her handlers, letting them know about the planned operation and requesting backup surveillance from a distance. Her fellow recruits noticed that she seemed more confident and upbeat than usual, which fit perfectly with her cover story of having found new opportunities. Jake Morrison even made a point of congratulating her, clearly pleased that his recommendation had been accepted. Uncle Morrison doesn't usually give people second chances, he told her during lunch. You must have made a good impression. Just remember what he said about discretion. That evening, Sarah made her way to Building C as instructed. The structure was located in a remote corner of the base, away from the main training areas and living quarters. As she approached, she saw several vehicles parked outside, including the unmarked truck she had observed during her surveillance. Morrison was there along with Lieutenant Collins and two men she didn't recognize. They looked like civilian contractors rather than military personnel, dressed in casual clothes but with the alert, watchful demeanor of people accustomed to dangerous work. Martinez, meet your colleagues for this evening, Morrison said, introducing her to the group. These gentlemen handle the transportation and logistics side of our operation. One of the civilians, a thin man with graying hair, looked her up and down skeptically. She looks pretty young. You sure she can handle this kind of work? She's tougher than she looks, Morrison replied, though Sarah could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Besides, we need someone who won't attract attention if they're seen around the base. The next few hours were unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her undercover career. She found herself helping to unload crates of weapons, ammunition, and what appeared to be military-grade communication equipment from the truck. The items were clearly stolen or diverted from legitimate military supplies, representing a serious breach of national security. Sarah documented everything she could without being obvious about it, using her hidden camera to capture serial numbers and other identifying information. The scale of the operation was larger than she had initially suspected, involving not just simple theft but sophisticated smuggling of high-value military assets. The work was physically demanding, and Sarah had to be careful not to demonstrate more strength and coordination than her cover identity should possess. She made sure to struggle with heavy boxes and ask for help frequently, maintaining the image of someone barely capable of handling the work. During a break in the loading process, she overheard a conversation between Lieutenant Collins and one of the civilian contractors that provided crucial intelligence about the operation's scope and leadership. The buyers in Central America are getting impatient, the contractor was saying. They want confirmation that the next shipment will include the communication equipment they requested. Tell them it's already in progress, Collins replied. The colonel has everything arranged. We just need to get this batch moved out before the next inspection cycle. Sarah's blood ran cold at the mention of the colonel. This suggested that the criminal operation extended much higher up the chain of command than she had originally thought. A colonel would have access to far more sensitive materials and information than a sergeant, making this conspiracy potentially much more dangerous to national security. As the night wore on, Sarah learned more about the operation's structure and methods. The stolen equipment was being sold to various buyers, including foreign military organizations and criminal groups. The money was being laundered through a series of shell companies and offshore accounts, with the profits shared among the participants based on their level of involvement. By the time the work was finished, Sarah had gathered enough evidence to support significant criminal charges against everyone involved. But she also knew that the investigation was far from complete. The mention of a colonel suggested that there were still major players she hadn't identified, and the scope of the operation might extend to other military bases or installations. Morrison handed her an envelope containing $500 in cash, along with a warning about the consequences of discussing the evening's activities with anyone. "You did good work tonight, Martinez. There will be more opportunities like this if you continue to prove yourself reliable." As Sarah walked back to the barracks in the pre-dawn darkness, she reflected on how far her investigation had progressed. She was now a trusted member of a criminal organization, with access to information and activities that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional surveillance. But she was also deeper undercover than ever before, surrounded by people who wouldn't hesitate to kill her if they discovered her true identity. The most challenging part of her mission was yet to come. She needed to identify the colonel mentioned in the conversation and gather evidence of his involvement in the trafficking operation. This would require her to advance even higher in the criminal hierarchy, taking on greater risks while maintaining her carefully constructed cover identity. The stakes were rising, and any mistake could be fatal. The weeks following Sarah's first smuggling operation brought a dramatic shift in her status on the base. Word had somehow spread among certain circles that she was now under the protection of Sergeant Morrison's operation. The harassment from other recruits didn't stop entirely, but it became more cautious and less direct. Even Jake Morrison treated her with a new kind of respect, as if she had passed some important test. Sarah used this newfound position to gather more intelligence about the trafficking network. She was invited to participate in 2 more operations, each one revealing additional details about the scope and organization of the criminal enterprise. The stolen military equipment was being sold through an established network that had been operating for at least 3 years, generating millions of dollars in illegal profits. During her 5th week of training, Sarah finally learned the identity of the colonel mentioned in the overheard conversation. Colonel Richard Hayes was the base commander, a decorated officer with 25 years of military service and an impeccable public reputation. The revelation that he was the leader of the trafficking operation sent shockwaves through Sarah's understanding of the situation. The discovery came during a late-night operation when Hayes himself made an unexpected appearance at the smuggling site. Sarah was helping to load communication equipment into a civilian truck when a black sedan pulled up to the building. The other participants immediately became more alert and respectful as Hayes emerged from the vehicle. "Good evening, gentlemen," Hayes said, his command presence evident even in this illegal context. "I trust everything is proceeding according to schedule." Sarah kept her head down and continued working, but she listened carefully to every word of Hayes' conversation with Morrison and Collins. The colonel was clearly the operational leader, making decisions about which equipment to steal, which buyers to work with, and how to avoid detection by military investigators. "The Pentagon audit is scheduled for next month," Hayes was saying. "We need to adjust our procurement timing to ensure that any missing items won't be noticed until after the inspection is complete." The level of sophistication and inside knowledge required for such planning confirmed that this wasn't just a group of rogue soldiers stealing equipment for quick profit. This was an organized conspiracy that threatened national security at the highest levels. Hayes had access to classified information about military operations, procurement schedules, and security protocols that made his criminal activities exponentially more dangerous. After Hayes left the scene, Morrison approached Sarah with a new assignment. "The colonel was impressed with your work tonight," he told her. "He's asked me to give you additional responsibilities with higher compensation." Sarah tried to look pleased while internally preparing for whatever new challenge was about to be presented. "I'm grateful for the opportunity, sir. What kind of additional responsibilities?" "Administrative support," Morrison replied. "The colonel needs someone to help with paperwork, record keeping, that sort of thing. Someone who can be trusted with sensitive information and who won't ask unnecessary questions." This was exactly the kind of access Sarah needed to gather evidence against Hayes, but it also represented a significant escalation in risk. Working directly with the colonel would put her under much closer scrutiny, and any mistake in her cover identity would be immediately detected by someone with Hayes' experience and authority. "I'd be honored to help the colonel with whatever he needs," Sarah said, maintaining her grateful recruit persona. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself spending time in the base administration building, ostensibly helping with various clerical tasks, but actually serving as Hayes' assistant for his criminal activities. She helped him maintain coded records of stolen equipment, coordinate with buyers, and plan future operations. The work gave her unprecedented access to the details of the trafficking network, but it also revealed the true scope of Hayes' corruption. He wasn't just stealing equipment for profit. He was using his position to sell classified military technology to foreign governments and terrorist organizations. The implications for national security were staggering. Sarah carefully documented everything she could while maintaining her cover as an eager but not too bright assistant. Hayes seemed to view her as a useful tool rather than a potential threat, which worked to her advantage. He spoke freely around her about sensitive matters, apparently confident that she lacked the knowledge or intelligence to understand the significance of what she was hearing. The breakthrough came when Hayes asked her to deliver a package to a contact off the base. This contains some technical specifications that our buyer needs to review, he told her, handing her a sealed envelope. Take this to the Riverside Hotel downtown and give it to a man named Viktor Petrov. He'll be waiting in the lobby at 1,400 hours. Sarah recognized the name from intelligence briefings she had received before beginning her undercover assignment. Viktor Petrov was a known arms dealer with connections to several hostile foreign governments. The fact that Hayes was personally coordinating with such a dangerous criminal confirmed that this trafficking operation had international implications. The delivery meeting went smoothly, with Sarah playing the role of an unknowing courier while Petrov examined the documents she had brought. She managed to take discreet photos of Petrov and observe his security arrangements, gathering additional intelligence about the broader criminal network. When she returned to the base, Hayes seemed pleased with her performance. Petrov was impressed with your professionalism, he told her. He specifically requested that you handle future deliveries to his organization. This presented Sarah with both an opportunity and a dilemma. Continued involvement with Petrov would provide valuable intelligence about the international aspects of the trafficking operation, but it would also expose her to greater scrutiny from experienced criminals who might be more likely to detect her true identity. The situation became even more complicated when Hayes invited her to attend a high-level planning meeting for the trafficking network's next major operation. I want you there to take notes and handle communications, he explained. This is going to be our biggest deal yet, and I need someone I can trust to help coordinate the details. The meeting was scheduled to take place in a private dining room at an upscale restaurant off the base. Sarah arrived to find Hayes, Morrison, Collins, and 3 civilian contractors she hadn't seen before. The atmosphere was professional and businesslike, despite the illegal nature of their discussion. Gentlemen, we have an unprecedented opportunity, Hayes began, addressing the group. Our contacts in Eastern Europe are willing to pay $15 million for a complete communications package that includes both hardware and software components. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what Hayes was proposing. The communications package he was describing included some of the most sensitive military technology in existence, systems that could compromise national security if they fell into the wrong hands. The fact that he was willing to sell such materials to Eastern European buyers suggested connections to hostile intelligence services. As the meeting progressed, Sarah took detailed notes while secretly recording the conversation using equipment hidden in her clothing. The participants discussed logistics, security arrangements, and profit-sharing agreements with the casual professionalism of legitimate business executives. The most disturbing revelation came when Hayes outlined his long-term plans for expanding the trafficking operation. This deal will provide enough capital for us to establish operations at 3 additional bases, he said. I've already identified potential recruits at each location who could be brought into the organization. The scope of Hayes' ambitions was breathtaking and terrifying. He wasn't content with running a single trafficking operation. He was planning to establish a nationwide network of military personnel engaged in selling sensitive equipment and information to foreign buyers. As the meeting concluded, Hayes pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. I've been watching your work, Martinez, and I'm very pleased with your development. How would you feel about taking on an expanded role in our organization? Sarah forced herself to appear excited by the prospect. I'd be very interested, sir. This opportunity has already changed my life. Hayes smiled approvingly. Good. I'm planning to recommend you for a transfer to one of our new locations once your basic training is complete. You'd have a cover position in military intelligence, which would provide excellent access to the kinds of materials our buyers are interested in. The irony of Hayes offering her a position in military intelligence wasn't lost on Sarah, but she maintained her enthusiastic facade. That sounds like an incredible opportunity, sir. I won't let you down. As she left the restaurant that evening, Sarah knew that her investigation had reached a critical juncture. She had gathered extensive evidence of Hayes' criminal activities and his plans to expand the trafficking network, but she was also being drawn deeper into the organization at a pace that was becoming difficult to manage. The next phase of her mission would require her to maintain her cover while finding a way to expose the trafficking network before Hayes could establish operations at additional military bases. The stakes had never been higher, and the margin for error was shrinking rapidly. One mistake could not only end her mission, but also allow a dangerous criminal organization to expand its threat to national security. The final phase of Sarah's mission began with an emergency transmission to her handlers. The intelligence she had gathered about Colonel Hayes' plan to expand the trafficking network to multiple military bases required immediate action from federal law enforcement agencies. But the timing of any raids would have to be carefully coordinated to avoid exposing her identity and to ensure that all key players were captured simultaneously. Sarah's cover was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as Hayes gave her access to more sensitive information and higher-level criminal activities. She was walking a dangerous tightrope, gathering evidence while avoiding suspicion from people who were experienced in detecting threats and eliminating problems. The situation reached a crisis point when Hayes informed her about the trafficking network's most ambitious operation yet. A shipment of advanced missile guidance systems was going to be stolen from a high-security depot and sold to Petrov's organization for delivery to hostile foreign governments. This operation will require absolute precision and security, Hayes told her during a private briefing. Any mistakes could expose our entire network and result in severe consequences for everyone involved. Sarah nodded seriously, but internally, she was calculating how to document this operation while ensuring that the missile guidance systems didn't actually reach their intended buyers. The technology involved was so sensitive that its theft could compromise American military operations around the world. "What's my role in the operation?" she asked. Hayes smiled. "You're going to help coordinate communications between our team and Petrov's people. It's a position of significant trust and responsibility." 2 days before the planned theft, Sarah received an encrypted message from her handlers confirming that federal agents were in position to intercept the operation. But the message also contained disturbing intelligence that complicated the situation further. Viktor Petrov had been identified as an agent of a hostile foreign intelligence service, and his interest in American military technology was part of a broader espionage operation targeting multiple NATO countries. The trafficking network that Hayes had established was inadvertently serving as a pipeline for state-sponsored military espionage. This revelation elevated the stakes of Sarah's mission far beyond a simple criminal investigation. She was now working to prevent what could become a significant national security breach with international implications. The pressure to maintain her cover while ensuring the operation's success had never been more intense. The night of the operation, Sarah arrived at the predetermined meeting point to find Hayes, Morrison, Collins, and several other participants preparing for the theft. The advanced missile guidance systems were stored in a heavily secured depot 20 miles from the base, and the plan involved using legitimate military credentials and forged paperwork to access the facility. "Everyone knows their assignments," Hayes addressed the group. "We have a narrow window of opportunity based on the security rotation schedule. Any delays or complications could result in catastrophic failure." Sarah's role was to monitor communications between the theft team and Petrov's representatives, who were waiting at a secure location to take possession of the stolen technology. She carried encrypted radios and coordination equipment while maintaining her cover as Hayes' administrative assistant. As the operation began, Sarah discreetly activated a tracking device that would allow federal agents to monitor the theft in real time. Her handlers had confirmed that they would wait until the stolen technology was in the possession of Petrov's people before making arrests, ensuring that everyone involved in the criminal conspiracy could be charged. The theft proceeded smoothly according to Hayes' plan. Using his command authority and forged documentation, the team gained access to the depot and removed 3 cases containing advanced missile guidance systems. Sarah watched with a mixture of admiration and revulsion as Hayes demonstrated the level of planning and inside knowledge that made such a sophisticated crime possible. During the transfer to Petrov's people, Sarah's carefully maintained cover finally began to unravel. One of Petrov's security specialists, a former military officer with experience in counterintelligence, began asking probing questions about her background and training. "Your file seems unusually sparse for someone with your level of access," he commented, studying documents that Hayes had provided about her. "Most military intelligence personnel have more extensive training records." Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but she maintained her composed expression. "I'm still pretty new to all of this," she replied. "Colonel Hayes has been very patient about bringing me up to speed." The security specialist continued his examination of her credentials, and Sarah realized that her cover identity might not withstand serious scrutiny from someone with professional training in detecting deception. She began mentally preparing for the possibility that her true identity would be discovered before federal agents could intervene. Just as the situation was becoming critical, her radio crackled with an emergency transmission. Federal agents were moving in on all locations simultaneously, coordinating arrests of everyone involved in the trafficking network. Sarah breathed a silent sigh of relief as she realized that her mission was finally coming to an end. The next few minutes were chaotic as federal agents surrounded the transfer location and ordered everyone to surrender. Hayes initially tried to resist, apparently believing that his military rank would protect him from prosecution, but he was quickly overwhelmed and arrested along with the other participants. Sarah maintained her cover until the last possible moment, allowing herself to be arrested along with the other members of the trafficking network. Only after she was in federal custody did she reveal her true identity to the arresting agents, using code words that confirmed her status as an undercover operative. The aftermath of the operation exceeded everyone's expectations. Sarah's intelligence led to the arrest of 47 people across 4 military bases, including 3 high-ranking officers and numerous civilian contractors. The investigation also exposed connections to foreign intelligence services in 3 different countries, leading to diplomatic protests and increased security measures. Colonel Hayes was ultimately convicted on charges including treason, conspiracy, theft of military property, and espionage. His sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole reflected the serious national security implications of his crimes. Morrison, Collins, and the other participants received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years in federal prison. The stolen military technology was recovered before it could be transferred to foreign buyers, preventing what intelligence officials described as a potential catastrophe for American military operations worldwide. The advanced missile guidance systems and other equipment were returned to military control, and additional security measures were implemented to prevent similar thefts in the future. For Sarah, the completion of the mission marked the end of one of the most challenging assignments of her career. She had spent 2 months living as someone else, enduring harassment and degradation while gathering evidence against a sophisticated criminal network. The psychological toll of maintaining such an elaborate cover identity for an extended period was significant, but the results had justified the sacrifices. During her debriefing sessions with intelligence officials, Sarah reflected on the ironies of her undercover assignment. The same people who had viewed her as weak and vulnerable had unknowingly been dealing with one of the most capable operatives in the intelligence community. Their assumptions about her limitations had ultimately enabled her to gather evidence that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional investigation methods. The case also highlighted the ongoing challenges faced by women in military environments, even in the 21st century. The harassment and discrimination that Sarah had experienced as part of her cover were all too real for many female service members, representing systemic problems that extended far beyond individual criminal behavior. 6 months after the operation's conclusion, Sarah received a commendation for her work on the case, though the details of her assignment remained classified. She had returned to her regular duties with a new appreciation for the complexities of undercover work and the personal sacrifices required for successful intelligence operations. The trafficking network's exposure also led to significant reforms in military security procedures and oversight mechanisms designed to prevent similar conspiracies from developing. The case became a case study in intelligence circles, demonstrating both the potential vulnerabilities in military supply chains and the effectiveness of long-term undercover operations in exposing sophisticated criminal enterprises. As Sarah moved forward in her career, she carried with her the knowledge that her 2 months as a seemingly helpless recruit had prevented a serious breach of national security and protected American military personnel around the world. The success of her mission had vindicated the intelligence community's faith in her abilities and demonstrated the value of operatives who could convincingly assume identities far removed from their true capabilities and experience.